Hello and welcome to Asia Newsweek. I'm Yvonne Yong. Together we'll go through the top stories in the region and go beyond the headlines for a deeper look at Asia. Our top story. As the war in the Middle East intensifies, countries across Asia are urging their citizens to leave. Over the past week, Israel has pushed ahead with its ground invasion into Lebanon and targeted central Beirut. Iran has launched its biggest missile attack in Israel, although that's largely been unable to penetrate Israel's Iron Dome and defence systems. Nearly 2,000 people have been killed in Lebanon since fighting began there 2 weeks ago. The international response has been swift. The Philippines Department of Migrant Workers says it's preparing for the worst scenario as some Filipinos wait to be repatriated after flights were cancelled from Beirut. Indonesia's president has ordered the immediate evacuation of citizens in Lebanon, although some have registered their preference to stay. Chinese state media has shown the moment 146 Chinese citizens arrived from Lebanon on a chartered Air China flight. Meanwhile, Japan has sent 2 military airplanes to Jordan and Greece on standby to repatriate nationals if and when necessary. And South Korea has ordered its military aircraft to be dispatched as it pushes for citizens to leave the region.
The situation in the Middle East is highly unstable. We strongly urge our citizens currently staying in Lebanon and Israel to leave the place as soon as possible by using either available flights or ships.
Families are mourning the deaths of 20 students and 3 teachers after a fatal bus crash in Bangkok. The group had been on an excursion when the vehicle crashed and burst into flames. Police have arrested the driver as they investigate whether the collision was caused by negligence.
Well, this is absolutely devastating for the parents and the families of all of the children who were on board this bus. There were 44 students and their teachers on board, and they were on a school field trip from Uthai Thani, which is a province about 250 k's from Bangkok. Apparently they'd just been to Ayutthaya, which is the old capital of Siam, and they were heading to lunch when one of the tyres on the bus burst and they crashed into a barrier. Now, apparently the bus was powered by compressed gas, and that crash ignited the fuel tanks and caused this massive blaze. And you can see from all of the photos and videos on social media, flames and thick grey smoke just billowing from the windows of the bus. And you look at those images and it's hard to imagine that anyone could have survived that, but some people did. They're now being treated in hospital, but of course many more people have died. And after the blaze was extinguished, it took emergency services hours before they could actually even recover the bodies, because they had to wait until the bus cooled down enough. So that just indicates how intense, how fierce and how hot this fire must have been. Now, Thailand's Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra was moved to tears when she addressed reporters. She has visited some of the survivors in hospital, and she's also announced that there will be compensation and that the medical bills of the survivors will be paid. But this will no doubt cause many, many questions to be asked.
At least 3 people have died and 15 others are injured after a stabbing attack inside a supermarket in Shanghai. Local police say they arrested a 37-year-old man at the scene. The attack is the latest in a series of stabbing incidents in major Chinese cities this year. At least 15 people have been killed by a landslide at an illegal Indonesian gold mine. Torrential rain triggered the disaster near an isolated Sumatran village. Rescuers worked through the night to save dozens of people who were trapped. Relief efforts have been hampered by the remoteness of the area. The disaster follows a similar landslide that killed 23 at another informal mine in July. 2 people are reported dead after TyphoonKrathon made landfall on the southwest coast of Taiwan, but at least 9 others have been killed in a hospital fire that broke out as authorities were evacuating patients.
Submerged motorbikes in flooded streets as TyphoonKrathon makes its mark on the western plains of Taiwan. TyphoonKrathon was on track to be the first Category 4 storm in 40 years to hit the western plains of Taiwan. It had weakened by the time it made landfall, but it still brought wind gusts of up to 162 kilometres an hour in the city of Kaohsiung. Even protective barriers weren't spared when winds lashed the southern west parts of the island. An uncommon place for a storm to hit.
We wanted to have a look at what a typhoon looks like that hasn't hit Taiwan's central mountain range and what kind of rain and wind it will bring.
While some embraced the opportunity, others heeded warnings to stay away.
Because Typhoon Gami was quite severe earlier this year, this time everyone is more cautious and prepared this time around. Just need to be prepared so we can face this typhoon.
The island has shut down for the second day, with flights grounded and schools and offices shut.
Unfortunately, we can't get any help at the airport because it is closed. We are trying to find a way to leave Kaohsiung as soon as possible.
At least 9 people died of smoke inhalation after an electrical fire broke out in a hospital in the southernmost county. Health officials had been evacuating patients to the other facilities because of the typhoon when the fire broke out. The cause of the blaze is under investigation. The typhoon is expected to further weaken into a tropical depression as it moves north. Amanda Robson, ABC News.
Singapore's former Transport Minister Iswaran has been sentenced to 12 months prison in a rare corruption case that has gripped the island nation. For more on the landmark ruling, Yvonne Chong, Associate Professor of Political Science at the National University of Singapore, is with us. Ian, are you surprised by the sentencing? What has been the reaction in Singapore?
I'm a little bit surprised by the sentencing. So the sentencing of 12 months a year is much more than both the prosecution and the defense had been asking for. So the judge, in making the sentence, declared that he needed to send a strong signal against corruption. So there had been some rumblings earlier in Singapore that the requested sentencing was too light. So in this regard, the final decision by the judge has somewhat mollified those sorts of opinions.
Well, this case has garnered international attention, possibly due to the fact that corruption cases such as this are so rare in Singapore. How does the island nation keep such a record, and how damaging could this be for the ruling party?
So the system in Singapore, they have tried to keep corruption down by a mixture of paying public servants, including political appointees, very well, and also by harsh punishments. So that has, I suppose, worked for a while. Now, the question that comes up is that Singapore of today is very different from the Singapore when those laws came about. There is a lot more money, there's a lot more wealth in Singapore. So the question is whether that old approach is sufficient, whether people can get paid enough. Is there a upper limit to what politicians should get paid? And of course, there is the reality that people can get tempted by many things. So however much you throw at a person may not be enough. And I guess the related issue is, whether Singapore really wants people that they get on board because they're interested in the compensation rather than public service. So those are the sort of lingering issues. In terms of how damaging it is to the ruling party, the People's Action Party, I think the damage right now is somewhat limited because the ruling party has been seen to act quite swiftly and quite harshly. There were questions that if Iswaran was let off too lightly, there could be some backlash. That doesn't seem to be the case now. But at any rate, the ruling party is highly dominant. They have a very robust party machinery, so they would be able to weather storms such as this one.
Dr. Yvonne Chong, thank you.
Thank you.
Japan's new Prime Minister has announced a snap election for the 27th of October, a year ahead of schedule. Shigeru Ishiba has replaced former Prime Minister Fumio Kishida after winning a leadership ballot for the ruling Liberal Democratic Party last week. He has since dissolved Parliament's lower house, saying he wants the new administration to be judged by the people as soon as possible. A former police chief has been jailed in South Korea for failing to prevent a 2022 crowd crush that killed 159 people. Former station chief Lee Im-jae was sentenced to 3 years in prison. He's the first official to be convicted for what the court ruled was a foreseeable tragedy. 2 other former police officials have received 2 years in jail and a 1-year suspended sentence, respectively, for their roles in the deadly incident. Hundreds of millions of people are travelling across China during a week-long holiday to celebrate its National Day. This Golden Week, all eyes are on Chinese consumers and whether they'll spend big to prop up the ailing economy. East Asia correspondent Kathleen Calderwood reports from Beijing.
The streets of Beijing are full of people, many waving flags, some even wearing Chinese flag stickers on their faces. Now, amid the economic slump here, last week Beijing announced a raft of stimulus measures and the stock market has surged in response. In fact, the largest single-day gains since 2008 were recorded on Monday, ahead of the market's closing for the week-long break. So authorities here will be hoping that's enough to buoy the mood of the Chinese people, so they might spend a bit more on their holidays.
I think everyone sees the trend will get happy, and they say, get more money to to spend in the holidays. Everybody talks about the economy is not very good. At the same time, I think we still can enjoy our lives.
The most important thing is we can relax. We can think nothing about the work.
The National Day was marked by an official flag-raising ceremony at Tiananmen Square this morning, attended by more than 120,000 people. It followed a speech by Chinese President Xi Jinping on Monday night, during which he called Taiwan sacred Chinese territory. So-called reunification is, of course, not something supported by the current Taiwanese government. All this comes just days after Australian Treasurer Jim Chalmers paid a visit to China to see how the challenges impacting its economy could in turn affect Australia.
Nearly 200 people have been killed in landslides and floods in Nepal, with dozens more still missing. Heavy rain has swollen most of the country's rivers, cutting off access to mountainous villages.
The main river of Kathmandu turns into a deadly torrent, the floodwaters trapping people in their homes.
What should we do now? This calamity has happened everywhere, not just to us. It is a big thing for us that our lives have been saved.
Landslides cut off almost every major road to the capital. The buses and trucks lined up on this highway are the lucky ones. A bus and 2 minibuses are among at least 6 vehicles completely buried by mud and rock. Rescuers have been digging non-stop, sometimes with excavators, sometimes with shovels, to recover the dead.
Yesterday we recovered the bodies of 14 people. Today we recovered 17 bodies. That's a total of 31.
While dozens remain missing in the floodwaters, authorities have managed to rescue hundreds more. Neighbouring regions haven't been spared, as the same weather system battering Nepal dumps heavy rain on the Indian state of Bihar.
We are facing challenges to bring food, and people have to bring their cattle to the dry ends of the road.
As the water begins to recede in Kathmandu, it leaves behind houses and livelihoods coated in mud.
We can't see right now how much loss has been incurred, but there are at least 400 shops here.
While the search for the missing continues, the cleanup begins. Lauren Beldy, ABC News.
And climate scientists are urging the government to step up investment in infrastructure as the region faces an increase in deadly rain-related floods. Kathmandu-based journalist Ramesh Bhushal says the Himalayas are experiencing a pattern of extreme weather due to climate change.
The extreme weather events are increasing, and it has become more regular. If you see, there was a big flood in Pakistan in 2022. There was a big flood in Uttarakhand in India in 2021. There was a big flood in Nepal in 2021. There was a big flood in Sikkim in 2023 in India. So across the Himalayas, these extreme events are becoming more normal. And scientists are saying that this kind of extreme events could be linked to climate change, and we should understand them better.
A Cambodian journalist known for his work tackling the online scam industry has been arrested in what some say is a retaliatory move from the country's authoritarian rulers. Investigative journalist MechDara has been awarded for his work exposing human trafficking, but is now behind bars, with rights groups and governments abroad calling for his immediate release. Jacob Sims is the Southeast Asia columnist for The Diplomat and joins us now. Jacob, what do we know about MechDara's arrest?
So on Monday afternoon, Dara was traveling back from Sihanoukville with his family, and he was arrested by a barrage of 6 cars, military police cars, who arrested him, held him without charge for 24 hours, without any awareness to his friends or family about where he was or his safety. And then eventually he wound up in pretrial detention in Kandal province on the other side of the country.
And what's led to people believing that this could be politically motivated? What kind of stories has MechDara uncovered?
So I think 2 things sort of lead to this assumption of that this is maybe retaliation. And the first is what he's been reporting on, and that's that there is a massive industry of cybercrime that exists in Cambodia that is heavily profited on and also demonstrated to be supported by many powerful people within the Cambodian government. And secondly, you can point to retaliation because Dara sort of appears at the end of about a 2.5-year, what you could look at as a systematic campaign of repression. Just about everyone who has reported on or spoke publicly on this issue from Cambodia has experienced some form of state intimidation. And Dara is effectively the last locally situated person gathering evidence and investigating this story.
And Jacob, multiple media outlets have now been shut down in the country, including MechDara's former workplace, Voice of Democracy. What do you think this says about freedom of expression in Cambodia, and how likely is it that this case could deter other journalists?
So I think this is going to have absolutely a chilling effect, and partially because there just aren't a lot of people who have watched what's happened over the last couple of years who are willing to confront the government on this issue any further. But second, as you said, systematically, every major free press outlet over the last several years has been either shut down, silenced, or co-opted into more of a state-aligned propagandist voice. And so I think you're very likely to see a continuing contraction of civil society, but there's not much further room for it to go. Dara certainly is one of the last local independent journalists that's willing to speak up on issues. And yeah, I think it's certain to have a chilling effect.
Jacob Sims, really good to get your views. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Yvonne.
Local elections are being held for the first time in a decade at a pivotal moment for Indian-controlled Kashmir. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government scrapped the Muslim-majority region's semi-autonomy in 2019. After 5 years under federal control, the election offers Kashmiris a chance to voice their concerns.
On the campaign trail in Kashmir, there's hope and uncertainty.
Inshallah, if the leadership changes, Kashmir's fate will also change.
For decades, Kashmiris have boycotted elections in protest against what they call oppressive Indian rule. But this time, voter turnout has been unusually high, and thousands are campaigning.
My childhood was stolen from me. I can't forget what I've been through for the rest of my life.
17-year-old Sugra is the daughter of separatist leaders who have been jailed for leading mass protests following Kashmir's 2016 uprisings. With her father still behind bars, she filed his political nomination papers and began campaigning for him.
I've prayed to God that those who have wronged us will be brought to justice. If we succeed in the coming days, my father will fix everything.
Indian-controlled Kashmir has lived through a violent insurgency for decades and is one of the world's most militarised regions. Kashmiris haven't voted for their own government for a decade and have been directly ruled by New Delhi since 2019.
Because of continuous regimentation and suffocation, people feel that this election may give them an opportunity to get a bit respite from the restrictions to which they have been subjected continuously.
Some Kashmiris view this election as a chance to push back against the Modi government's increasing control over the region. And politicians are tapping into that sentiment, especially targeting those still reeling from the loss of statehood and autonomy 5 years ago. The Prime Minister's party sees the enthusiastic voter turnout as a win.
Young Kashmiris have understood that instead of picking up guns and stones, it's better for us to vote.
But others still see no hope and will be boycotting the vote.
Every corner is filled with army personnel, and we can't even ask about each other's well-being. That's the level of fear we're living in.
As votes are counted, the results will reveal whether the region is undergoing a genuine transformation or whether it remains deeply divided. MechDara, ABC News, New Delhi.
More than 900 people have been released after being detained over a street protest against working conditions at a Samsung factory in India's south. Police say the demonstration was inconveniencing the public and had been organised without permission. Workers for the South Korean company have been striking for nearly a month now, demanding higher wages and union recognition in the state of Tamil Nadu.
The workers in that factory were registering a union, and they wanted to use the name of the company as part of the name of the union. And the company didn't want its name being used in the union's name, and that went to court. And now, effectively, the workers see this as just a roundabout way to stop the union from being registered.
A World War II bomb has exploded at a Japanese airport. The minor blast shot asphalt and dirt into the sky, causing a crater in a taxiway and the cancellation of more than 80 flights. The US bomb had been buried near the runway at Miyazaki Airport, which was built in 1943 on a former Japanese Navy training facility. Officials say they're still working out the cause of the sudden detonation, but confirmed there is no further danger at the site. More than 270,000 people have gathered in Japan for one of the biggest gaming conventions in the world. Now, this year marks the 34th Tokyo Game Show. Gamers were there to preview unreleased consoles and try out the newest titles, with many also taking the opportunity to dress up as their favourite character.
985 companies from 44 countries are in Tokyo to present the latest in gaming, and to celebrate some nostalgic icons. For many punters, the main draw card was previewing Sony PlayStation's first console in 4 years, the PS5 Pro.
I personally felt the difference in graphics quality between the PS5 and the PS5 Pro was huge. Even though I already have 2 PS5s at home, I felt I wanted to get a PS5 Pro as well. I'm a big fan of games, and I really want to experience them in high resolution.
Set to be released next month, fans were impressed with its graphics quality.
PlayStation 5 Pro is totally different.
Those attending also got a sneak peek of the sequel to the much-loved game Death Stranding before it launches next year. The original was a hit during the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, and its resonance came as a surprise to its makers.
The world became like Death Stranding, and people's evaluations of the game completely changed. People seem to realise the importance of delivery and human connection. I didn't predict the future. I didn't make it because I wanted the world to turn out that way.
Years later, crowds are back in full force, and attendees are here from across the globe. Though not everyone is here to see the big names. Some came to find something a little different.
There's a lot of great AAA stuff out here with 90-minute long queue times and that sort of thing, but you know, it's more about, for me, just being able to hop into something that maybe is lesser known, as long as it's accessible and indie games basically, and PC has a lot of that stuff.
Meanwhile, the chance to dress up as a favourite character is just another part of the experience, even if it sometimes feels like playing on hard mode.
Yesterday, I did some cosplay, and when you do cosplay, it's quite tiring. It's a lot of work standing in line and everything.
Either way, it's all fun and games. Madeline Lou Booth, ABC News.
And that's the program. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.